When it comes to making booktube videos, I found that there's a few basic categories that these videos kind of fall into. There's the typical top 10 list. There is a normal book review. There are recaps that might be weekly, or they might be monthly, or they might be both. Today we're going to do a monthly recap, and I know that it doesn't necessarily attract as many new people to the channel when you're doing a recap because they're trying to find out more about what you did as an individual, more so than like a top 10 list. That's cool. If you're brand new here, my name's Brian Bell. This is BellTube, and I want to welcome you on in. We're going to talk about the month of June today, and I have to say it was easily the least productive month I've ever had since starting this channel last November. I read less books, I uploaded less content, I had less live streams, and I appeared on only one other channel outside of my own, which is down on pretty much all categories for us so far. But never fear, that is going away for the month of July and moving forward. But I thought this would be a good time to recap kind of what worked for me in June, what didn't work for me, how I might be able to help you if you are looking at months ahead that might be similar to what I went through in the month of June. And if that's the case, then great. I've done my job. You've got some value for coming in today. Otherwise, hopefully you'll find some entertainment value in my successes and or unsuccesses. We're not going to call them failures that happened in the month of June. Let's get into it. So in the month of June, again, like I said, it was a kind of a slow reading month. I only completed 4 books. There's a 5th one that I'm going to show you as incomplete. It's not a DNF. I'm just not quite done with it yet as of filming of this episode. So let's talk about the books first. And by the way, I'm going to timestamp everything. So if you're somebody who wants to jump around to the parts that engage you, terrific. Otherwise, if you just want to let this roll, I always appreciate it because it helps the channel. All right, let's talk about the books. And the first book that we're going to talk about today is the first one that I read in the month of June, and that is City of the Seventh Moon by Attn Sparaboom. Now, I have said this name 3 times on the channel. I hope Attn, I got it right this time. This is a Spiffbo book. This is a self-published blog off competition. And it's really what I'm doing is reading 6 books for Team Philip Chase. And what I'm doing is submitting of the 6 books, the one that I think has the best chance to move on through the competition. It's not necessarily going to be my favorite book. It's the one that I think has the best chance to move on. And I really actually like this book. It's the first one that I've read. There are some compelling characters. There's some very good world building here. I had a couple of issues with it as well, but I'm not really going to talk too much about this book until I've read the rest of the books that are in my pile to read for Dr. Chase. Just because I want to be fair to everybody, and I don't want any recency bias to kind of blend in, because I'm going to be reading these books all the way through about October, and it might be challenging to remember what I said back in June, even though, of course, this is recorded. But I've been keeping my own private notes, and when I get through all my Spiffbox books, I will definitely come on and do more of a dedicated review on the book that I am submitting to Dr. Chase. So that was the first book that I read. It was a pleasant book to start with. Wasn't too long. It didn't overstay its welcome, and I liked, like I said, some of the characters. So I would consider it a win for the first book. Now, the next book that I read is The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez. This is, if you're new to the channel, we started a book club this month called the Quilluminati, and that consists of myself, Mike over at Mike's Book Reviews, Philip Chase, who I mentioned before about Spiffbo, and John Minton from Talking Story. By the way, I'm going to list everybody's channels in the description, so if you are unaware of any of those guys, which I highly doubt because they all have huge channels, you'll be able to find them in the description. But I had this idea a while back to start a book club. We call it the Quilluminati, and the first book that we read was The Vanished Birds. If you would like to find out what all of us thought about this book, head on over to Mike's Book Reviews after you watch this, not during, please. But after you watch this, head on over to Mike's Book Reviews. I'll link it in the description, and you'll get a good sense of what we all as a group thought about it, because we went from some of us thinking it was exceptional to one of us actually quitting the book at the 40% mark and DNFing it. That means did not finish if you are new to BookTube. So you got all range of opinions there. Very briefly, I will commend Simon Jimenez on a rookie effort. You know, his first book, The Vanished Birds, is quite good for a first book. There are some ambitious ideas in here. It's an ambitious writing style. It is highly original and unique, and I always give points to originality. That is big for me. If you think about how many millions of books there are in the world, it's incredible when you find something that is truly unique. And whether or not the story personally worked for me or not is maybe not as important as the fact that this book itself was kind of on a meta level, a different reading experience than I'm used to. So The Vanished Birds, on the actual Quilluminati review, I gave it a 3.75 stars, which I think is pretty fair given the fact that there were sections of the book that I really did like and there were sections of the book that I really did not like. So, like I said, if you want all the good information, go check out the Quilluminati on Mike's channel. By the way, that is a quarterly book club, and we are reading Ordinary Grace next. That's going to be up in September, and that review, or that gathering of the Quilluminati, will happen on Philip Chase's channel. You're going to have ample time to join us if you want to on that book read-along. All right, the next book that I read in June is David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas, and I am experimenting with my lights here a little bit. I'm holding the book a little bit lower than usual because apparently it was casting all kinds of shadows on my face. So, David Mitchell, Cloud Atlas. All right, so again, sort of like The Vanished Birds, this has a totally original and unique writing style. I was unprepared for it, and when we get to the One for the Road segment today, I may or may not talk about this because I have sort of something else planned in the back of my head. But needless to say, when you go on kind of these meta journeys when it comes to reading authors that do things quite outside the box, I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading them back to back, or in my case, kind of back to back to back to back to back over the last several months when I throw in Malazan and Jenny Wirtz and Shogun and Cloud Atlas and The Vanished Birds. There's just been a lot of really dense material. Cloud Atlas was probably the most challenging book that I've read, and it might just be because it's one of the more recent ones, and so I've kind of built up quite a bit of, I'm not going to say burnout, but my brain was working on overtime to digest some of these books. And the thing about Cloud Atlas that you need to know is that it's basically 5 stories that all sort of culminate into one story, but it takes the entire course of the book to do it. It moves through time. It's definitely science fiction. If you're familiar with something like Hyperion, where it has a bunch of short stories sort of combined into one overarching story, that's what you get here with Cloud Atlas. There were sections of this book that I found incredibly engaging and fun and rich and enlightening and character worthy and plot driven, and I loved it. There were also sections of this book that were borderline impossible to get through. Slog isn't even the right word. The first 40 pages are very well known for people giving up on this book entirely because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and you are really required to trust David Mitchell, the author, to get you where he wants you to go. I got through the first 40 pages, but I'll admit, I didn't love it. When it got to the second story, the book picked up for me, and it continued to pick up for me until we got to the 5th story. And if you've read this book, you probably know what I'm talking about. This book actually starts off in the past, moves through into the present and then into the future, and then works its way back, from the future to the present, back into the past, following those same stories and those same characters, kind of first, going one direction, then the other direction in time. That's really the format of this book. And so just by its own nature, the 5th story also is the 6th story, right? So it does the 5th story, and then rather than flipping back, because it's just about to turn around and go backwards again, it essentially repeats, and we get a doubly long 5th story, of which I thought was by far the most intentionally challenging, difficult, and for me, unpleasant part about this book. So it's one thing when you have a lot of sections of the book that, some you can draw that are great, some are just okay, but when the largest single section that's all together is the most unreadable, and it's unreadable in the fact that David Mitchell explores the idea of what if something really awful happened and we move into the distant future and language itself isn't really what we are used to, and he portrays that here in the book by writing in that language. Yeah, you can understand it. I mean, it just takes a while of reading it and thinking about it and getting used to the verbiage and getting used to basically the slang, because the whole section is written in almost slang to get through it, and I didn't find that particular part all that compelling. So this is a real mixed bag for me. We are going to do a book of the month, and we'll see where this one falls in. But yeah, David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas. I have not seen the film. I don't know how it compares. I know I probably haven't sold you on this book through what I've just talked about here. But if you are like me, if you like a unique and unordinary reading experience, then I would recommend Cloud Atlas for sure. I just wouldn't do it right after you finish something like The Vanished Birds, because your brain might want a little bit of a reset in between books of these kind of natures. Hopefully that makes sense. Thank God for the 4th book that I read this month, because it was really the only super fun one that I read, and that is The Primal Hunter by Zogarth. This is LitRPG. Thank you to the BellTube community who have read The Primal Hunter. That really pushed me to read it. It's fantastic. I love The Primal Hunter. I just found out there's at least 9 books, which is fantastic. Do I recommend The Primal Hunter? Yes and no. If you are pretty familiar with LitRPG, I'm going to say if you've read at least one, but probably at least 2 different LitRPG series, then yes, The Primal Hunter will work for you. I did it on Audible, where I do really 99% of my LitRPG reading, and it's Travis Baldree who narrates Cradle, does the Audible for this, and yeah, you guys, if you're familiar with the channel, you know what I think about Cradle, and if you're new to the channel, I don't like Cradle. Anyway, Travis Baldree, amazing narrator for The Primal Hunter. If you are new to LitRPG, go get Dungeon Crawler Carl, or go get The Good Guys by Eric Ugland, or go get He Who Fights with Monsters by Shirtaloon. But if you've done a few already and you kind of have a enjoyment of the genre and you know what it's all about, The Primal Hunter does everything that it's supposed to do. Big recommend for me on that book. Thanks again to the BellTube community for recommending it. I absolutely will be reading The Primal Hunter 2 in July. All right, let's talk about the book that I haven't finished yet, but I am currently still working through, and that is Disquiet Gods by Christopher Rocchio. This is book 6 of the main books in the Sun Eater series. Okay. Again, sort of like what I was talking about with Vanished Birds and Cloud Atlas, it's a little bit dense, it's a little bit heavy material, and again, depending on how you decide to read this series, I think your mileage may vary from mine. I've read one main book in Sun Eater per month for the last 6 months, and so it's all good in the sense that it's fresh in my mind, but in another sense, it's kind of a lot of heavy reading, and really books 4, which is Kingdoms of Death, and books 5, which is Ashes of Man, I did not like anywhere near as much as many booktubers are out there giving it 5 stars, giving them both 5 stars. I didn't give either one of them 5 stars. I found them to be quite depressing. I thought that for their page count, I wanted a little bit more hopefulness, but again, that part of the story probably necessitated our main character, Hadrian Marlowe, going through some stuff. And he goes through some stuff in those 2 books, but they're not short books, right? I mean, if they were each 300 pages, we're talking about a 600-page book, maybe. That was sort of a downer. That's a little bit like, maybe Pierce Brown's Dark Age, where you get about a 600-page book. It's somewhat depressing, and you move on. On the other hand, Kingdoms of Death and Ashes of Man are each between, I want to say, 500 and 700 pages apiece. So there's a lot of misery. I called those 2 books together The Many Miseries of Marlowe. And Disquiet Gods, while it didn't start kind of on that misery train, it did start kind of on a slow train, because it picks up after the events, obviously, of Ashes of Man, and there's some significant things that happen at the end of that book that require sort of a slow ramp up into Disquiet Gods. So again, not really bad reading, but not super fun reading like I got in Howling Dark, or like I got in Demon in White, or the new adventure that I got in the first book, which is, of course, Empire of Silence. So I have an incomplete score for Disquiet Gods because I'm not done with it yet. I really had hoped by the time that I filmed this June recap that it would be done, because I wanted to see if it was going to be a contender for the book of the month. Things just didn't work out that way for me. So as far as the book of a month goes, at the end of the video, we'll get to that. So like I mentioned, we only really did 3 main videos in the month of June. I'm going to look at my notes here for a second. The first one that we did was Beat Your Reading Slump. Now, I should have added an 11th one. There was 10 top reasons or 10 top ways to beat a reading slump. If I can add an 11th one here, I'm going to do it right now, and that is don't read dense books back to back to back. That will cause a reading slump, at least it did for me. Not so much a reading slump as just more like reading, I don't know, and the word's not even burnout either. I'm going to call it fatigue. It's not burnout because it wasn't like I stopped reading, but it was fatigue, where I would look over at the coffee table and see a book sitting there. Maybe reach for the book, maybe reach for an Xbox controller. I didn't really know. So I had some, reading fatigue. But yeah, I did make that video, 10 ways to beat a reading slump. I will put cards up, by the way, on all of these videos that I'm going to talk about right up here. So if you like, you can click on them and check them out for yourself if you've missed them. The next video that I did was one of the most fun things that I've done since starting the channel, and that was to create the nightclub book tag. It's awesome. I tagged a few people. Some of them have already done it, and they've tagged other people. I had a blast making this list. I'd never been tagged in a video before, so rather than waiting to be tagged, it's BellTube, you guys. I had to do one myself, and to try to make it original in a way that only somebody with my weird nightclub owning background might come up with. If you haven't checked it out yet, I had a blast doing it. Again, I'll put a card up here for it. Also, of course, we did the July TBR video last week. Again, here's a card for it. I'm very excited about the month of July. I learned quite a bit about myself in June. It helped prep me quite a bit for July. So if you want to know what I'm reading, check out that video. If you want to read along with me, it'll give us something to talk about in the comments. So in the month of June, we only did 2 episodes of For Whom the Bell Tolls, but they were both bangers, and they were both with people that I have grown to absolutely love both their content and as human beings. The first one was with Josh over at Red Fury Books. He is such a cool dude. We have a ton in common with our backgrounds in music. Mine is much more amateur. His is completely and legitimately professional. Definitely check out that episode if you haven't seen it yet. The other one that we did, oh my gosh, I was so glad she agreed to do it, and that was the For Whom the Bell Tolls with Madison Goodyear. If you have not seen Madison Goodyear's episode, I highly encourage you to check it out. She has been a big favorite of mine on BookTube really since I started watching this stuff about 3 or 4 years ago. And she had a very tragic and traumatic life event that has caused her to take a pause in her BookTube channel for about a year. She's back now. I'm really happy about it. I've already seen 2 of her new videos and they are great. But yeah, it was really fun having a one-on-one conversation with her. I want to thank everybody who shows up in these chats, by the way, when we do the live streams, because you really are the life of the party. You help provide some questions during those live streams that I think enrich the interviews and they make them better. And of course, for those of you on Team Replay, I love you guys just as much or maybe even more, because it shows that you're interested in this kind of content beyond the fact from when it's live, and it's something that you find some value in. It's really meaningful to me, and I'm glad to tell you in the month of July, I've already got 3 For Whom the Bell Tolls episodes lined up, and also in the month of August, I've got 3 more lined up. So we're coming at it full bore on the live streams. I have a blast doing them. So yeah, 2 live streams here at BellTube headquarters in the month of June, 1 Quilluminati stream over on Mike's channel, 3 live streams. It was a lot of fun, but as I'm looking at the calendar moving forward, there's a ton to come. Sit down, buckle up. We are going to have a blast. Okay, so it's time to award a book of the month. You guys, this has been I've only really started doing books of the month, I want to say since like maybe February or March. And this one was tricky because if we were just talking about my favorite book of the month, it would easily be The Primal Hunter. But objectively speaking, when I'm talking about a book of the month, I don't want it to just be my favorite book of the month. I want it to be something that is, pretty high quality literature if I encounter it. And I have to be honest, Cloud Atlas is very high quality literature. It is the book of the month. Even though there are big sections of the book that I did not enjoy, it doesn't take away from the fact that it is super high quality material. David Mitchell, Cloud Atlas, June on BellTube. It is the winner of the book of the month, and it'll be interesting to find out if it even makes my top 10 list for the year. I don't know. I can appreciate it for what it is, but when we get into those top 10 books, there is some rugged competition. We'll see as we get through the year, but for June, Cloud Atlas is the book of the month. Okay, so let's do one for the road today. And as I'm sitting here, and I know I mentioned earlier in the video that I didn't want to get too much into the dense, back stuff. So let's not do that. Let's talk about what I originally planned today for one for the road, because I think it's super important. And it's something that I have to very much pay attention to in my own life, or things kind of start to unwind in certain areas. And that is to have some balance. And what do I mean by that? I don't mean work and life balance. That gets kind of blurred lines quite a bit, especially with people working from home. Those lines have kind of been blurred. No, for balance, what I'm talking about are individual aspects of your life that I think might be important to examine. So that might be your physical fitness. That might be your diet. That might be your mental acuity. It might be your spiritual, beliefs. There's a spiritual side to all of us, at least most of us, I hope. Whatever you believe, by the way, is amazing for me, so long as that you enrich whatever it is we call our soul in a way that is meaningful to you. But financial is another one. So look at things like physical and financial and mental acuity and your emotional levels. All of these things, I believe, require a little bit of attention to make sure that one isn't getting so far out of balance with everything else, right? So, give you an example. If all you did was focus on your spiritual side, you could be, in la la land meditating all day long, but sooner or later, someone's going to come take your house and your furniture. So that's probably not going to be, a wise move to do here, in the West. On the other hand, if all you do is focus on the mental acuity stuff and you ignore any physical fitness, you might run into some health problems, or you might run into some emotional health problems if you don't pay attention a little bit to that. So that's all I really wanted to talk about for One for the Road, is just to kind of give us all of a reminder to say, we have these different aspects of our lives, and are we giving at least some noticeable attention to each of them so we don't get so far out of balance in any of the one thing that it kind of tips us over? I think it's important. Hopefully you do too. June was an interesting month, you all. I have to thank you guys for being here because it's been an amazing trip since like November starting this channel. The best is for sure yet to come. In looking at July, I am fired up. I'm looking at August. I'm fired up. I can't wait to Quilluminati in September. There's tons to look forward to. So while this month of June was just kind of okay for me, I know moving forward, there's a lot of great stuff ahead. So I'm interested to know on a couple of things. How was your month of June? Did you read something fantastic that you want to share with me? Did something happen in your life that you want to throw in the comments? Think about the one for the road. Are there aspects of your life that you want to pay more attention to and you feel like if you left a comment, it might hold you a little bit more accountable? That might work. Also, if you like the type of content here, and by the way, if you've made it to the end of this video, I'm going to guess you're already a subscriber. But if you're not, if there's that small part of you that has made it all the way to the end and you haven't yet subscribed, do me a favor, click the subscribe button if you like what we do here. It'll come on your home feed more often. We'll get to share some time together. I promise you some of the books that I'm going to be reading coming up are fantastic. You're going to want to see about them, and we do some weird and different stuff here over at BellTube. You'll want to be a part of that too. Again, thanks guys for everything. As usual, I'm sending you out like we always do. Here's your fortune.